Now, one of the few messages of hope during the beginning of the pandemic came from Captain Sir Tom Moore. Now, he set out to raise £1,000 for the NHS charities for his 100th birthday by walking the lengths of his garden, but it captured the hearts of the nation and he ended up raising £33 million. Captain Sir Tom Moore died in February with the Queen leading tributes to him. Now it's Armed Forces Day. His daughter Hannah Ingram-Moore joins us to tell us how the Captain Tom Moore Foundation is carrying on her father's legacy. Hannah, welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
It's lovely to have you here.
Lovely to meet you.
Now, he was such an inspiration. Tell us a bit about what he was like as a man. What was he like?
I mean, everything you saw, it was really what he was like. You know, we grew up, he was an older father, so he was in his 50s when my sister and I were born.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so he gave us, it was something quite unique, I think. You know, I've told stories about him giving us pieces of wood with nails and a hammer to make sure we could hammer straight and don't hit our thumbs.
Oh.
Very practical, and what you saw is what he was.
Yeah, he just, and the energy that he had, I mean, at 100, doing all that.
Extraordinary. He moved in with us when he was 87. So my mum had died. And we said, look, we just didn't want him to be on his own. So, I mean, he had to think about it, right? Because he was very independent. But he came and we all moved into that house where you saw him walking up and down and we all did it together.
Yeah, and he was inspired to do that just to raise £1,000. He thought he would just do that. Talk to us about, you know, what happened when you realised that suddenly this was picking up momentum.
Well, it's extraordinary. It was my husband who said, look, Tom, we can't throw you a 100th birthday party, so why don't you walk 100 laps instead, and we'll give you £1 a lap. And my father, being a stoic Yorkshireman, said, well, yes, of course. And then I said, look, £100 doesn't buy you a lot. Let's make it 1,000. And within 24 hours, we were on regional television, 48 national. And within a week, we'd raised £500,000.
And where were you putting these clips of him doing this? Because they must have seen it on some sort of social media or something.
Yeah, so Benji and Georgia, so his grandchildren, my kids, they made an iMovie and pushed it out on social. We never thought anything about it. I did a little press release and set up a Just Giving page. We thought we might raise £1,000 in 4 weeks, but it was 38.9 million in 3.5 weeks.
Oh, my God. It is incredible,
It's incredible, incredible.
I mean, the journey must have been amazing. When it started to pick up momentum, what were you thinking, and what was going on?
I think we didn't think, really. We just were propelled from one day to the other. We were doing 30 interviews a day, and we became obsessed because if we didn't do the interview, perhaps people wouldn't donate. And by now, £12 million in 2 weeks. We just didn't stop and think. It just became something that we were dealing with. We had drones, helicopters, cameras on 30-foot poles looking over the walls, satellite vans around every boundary of the house. And we, as a family, locked together. So my husband and Benji at 17, were 16 then, picked up 1.5 million emails in 10 days.
And what was your father, what kind of conversations was he having with you about this?
He was the stoic. He was, but also quite loved it because he was
but
talking.
You would do, wouldn't you?
He was talking to the world. And we would rotate around the world. We'd do Australia breakfast TV at midnight and get up and do all of European TV. He was on the front page of almost every newspaper in every continent. So wherever we went, the presenters sobbed, mostly for pure love, hope.
Yeah.
Hope.
That's just so lovely, isn't it? Was he quite tired doing all that?
Yeah, well, we kept giving him a rest, of course, because he was 100.
He's 100 years old. Amazing.
It's amazing.
Could I ask, because something I've always been interested in, how do you find it that there's someone that's got like a tattoo of his face on their chest? How do you find stuff like that? Is that a bit weird for you?
It is all a bit strange, but we've been in this bubble for 16 months. And people will still send me, I've just gone to somewhere in the UK and they'll send me a picture of his face on a wall. And keep in mind this, that we had 225,000 birthday cards. And the hall that they were in Benji's school hall, that was just 10% of them.
What do you do with all of those cards?
Well, they are...
What do you do with them?
Well, they are currently in storage in London whilst we think about, because I feel strongly that they're a national treasure. But that's on my list of things to talk to people about.
God. I mean, you know, talk to us about, because he obviously spent time in the armed forces.
Yes.
What was it like for him? What did he tell you about that experience?
Well, I suppose the first thing to bear in mind is that by the time I was born, my sister was born, it was a long time before. So he didn't share it, but I don't think he didn't share it because he didn't want to. I think he thought it wasn't that relevant to us. But of course, as we grew older, he started to talk to us. And I can honestly say, having sat with him as he wrote his autobiography, that the years he had in the army were everything to him.
Really?
He felt that he had made the most wonderful colleagues and friends and allies, and he was so proud of fighting for his country.
So he went to war?
He fought in Burma.
Really? And what role did he play in that?
Well, he had learnt to ride motorbikes at a very young age. So he was supposed to go and drive tanks, but they collared him and said, could you train this lot to ride a motorbike, please? So his role was to go out during the night, no lights, to try and see where the Japanese enemy lines were. And they would know if he'd found them, if he didn't come back.
Oh.
And he was 20.
It's a totally different world, isn't it?
A totally different world. And what he said is that, first of all, you had to cope with the fact that the first enemy was the jungle itself. Because there were spiders bigger than your hand.
I can imagine.
Everything wanted to eat you, and that's even before you picked up a gun. I mean, I think they underplay it, these soldiers, how extraordinarily they fought for us, for what we have today.
And of course, we now, I mean, because when they talk about a lot of young people and their university days have been destroyed, and it's just, I think to myself, this is a horrible time, but it's just 1 year. You know, could you imagine if a lot of the young people here had to actually go and fight in war? I mean, I can't even begin to think what that must be like. I mean, I'd be the first one. I couldn't do it.
No, I mean, how would we even contemplate it? And how would you look at your children and think, you know, I have a 17-year-old. So imagine that he would be called up and had no choice because we had to defend our country. It's extraordinary what they did. And of course, Burma was somewhat of a forgotten war because the war in Europe finished before the war in Asia finished. So he was bittersweet when it was celebrations here. For him, that he knew that we weren't free until his friends and colleagues came back from India.
Yeah, it's so moving, isn't it, really?
I just feel bad that we'd sort of said that we couldn't do Glastonbury, and then you're talking about this. I feel awful now.
Well, you know, I mean, he's raised all this money. You've set up a foundation. Talk to us about that.
And the foundation really emerged as it was 2 weeks as we hit £12 million. And my father had gone in for arrest. Benji and Colin, my husband, were picking up the 1.5 million emails. And the British Army had gone and the TV companies had gone. And as I looked down the drive, the world's media was coming up it.
Gosh.
And I can honestly say, even with all the years of business experience, I remember thinking, I don't know what to do.
When you say the world's media, what was that, like a storm of paparazzi and...
Wow.
God.
And I just didn't know what to do.
I could only dream of that. I'm here, darling. Left,
This
right,
way,
this way. Closer. So there they were, like a storm of paparazzi. It must have been like something out of a movie.
Yeah, it was exactly like that. And they were jostling for space.
Oh my God.
And it was just me with Georgia, who was 11 at the time. And they said, can you go live 3 minutes? And of course, we got very used to this by then. Yeah. And I said, yes, of course, because we felt people will donate, we need to speak. And I thought, well, they'll ask me, clearly because I'm the parent, straight to Georgia at 11.
Oh, God.
So, Georgia, how do you feel about your grandfather becoming a beacon of hope to the world? How does that make you feel emotionally? She's 11. She's 11.
What did she say?
I have no idea, but it passed.
It did. That's so hot. Poor thing. She must have been petrified.
But actually, by then, she was quite used to it. She was quite used to it.
Well, actually, you know.
I'm an old pro by now.
Yes, darling.
But it was then when I think eventually I went in and my father said to me, I think you need to make this stop. It's too much. Because all I have to do is speak.
Yeah.
You and the rest of the family are managing global media attention and everything that goes with it. And it was then that we said, even if we wanted to make it stop, the forward motion was...
It's like a juggernaut.
Yeah. And also, we didn't want to make it stop. what we realised is that we needed to manage it. And we needed to, I suppose we also appreciated at that point that he'd become this global beacon of hope, that this legacy, we needed to capture it. And the values that he stood by, we needed to put it somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's how the Captain Tom Foundation was formed, around the kitchen table with 5 of us.
That's
one was 100 and one was 11.
That's so good.
What's so lovely is how people have sort of followed in his footsteps. There was a very old man on my street in London who, for I don't know how many months, but he spent every day he went up and down with his, what they called trolley things.
Yeah.
And obviously he could barely walk, and he was doing this. I think he raised a lot of money too, as well. Not obviously on the same scale, but I imagine that was happening across the country.
Around
Lots
the world.
of people. Yeah.
People from 163 countries
Wow.
donated.
All I was wondering is, like, could you still put your bins out? Because, like, if the media are there, like, you don't want to come out in your dressing
Well,
gown.
it was a challenge.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
It sounds
It's
very
practical
obtrusive.
challenge.
Things, isn't
Yeah.
it? You don't think about that, but you'd open your front door, oh, they're there again.
But I thought, honestly, that they didn't really want a photo of me taking the bins out, so we risked it.
Right, good.
On the basis that probably wouldn't make front page news.
Yeah.
But they took a picture of almost everything else, and
It's a gorgeous house.
thank you.
Very nice. I saw that and I thought, ooh, that's
Thank you very much.
It's amazing that he just took it in his stride, though. Fair play to him that he just started.
He really did.
He did.
He
yeah.
really did, and I think that he was sharp enough. You know, he was sharp. That he appreciated when he spoke that it gave people hope.
Wow.
And as we went around the world and we would speak to the presenters, that honestly, they would cry. I mean, there was emotion everywhere we went. But as I walk around even today, people will cross the road and cry. It is an extraordinary humanitarian emotion that it connects in people.
Yeah.
And the Just Giving said that just on their site, another 6 million was raised.
That's just,
And so around the world, we think there's probably another 30, 40 million that was raised.
you must be so proud of him, right?
Incredible.
I mean, what a legacy to leave that. I mean, you've done 100 years, you leave that. I mean, that's the way to do it, isn't
It's
it?
the way to do it. And he was so proud of that they had a charity in his name, and who could imagine that? And the charity was born not out of loss, not out of need, it was born out of hope.
Yeah.
And that's the legacy he's left behind. You know, we connect the generations. We're a multi-generational family, and he thrived.
I think that's so lovely as well. The other thing I love is the fact that you are a multi-generational family living together. It's so heartwarming, isn't it?
Yeah.
Lovely. It's nice to see that.
Yeah, and he wasn't a spare. You know, he wasn't in an annex, and there's nothing wrong with an annex, but he wasn't.
He was in the
He
house
was in
with
the
everybody
house with
else.
us. So, you know, we miss him like deafening silence.
I bet.
But, you know, his hobnobs are still in the cupboard.
Are they chocolate covered?
Yeah, I was going to ask.
But very
the
much
best one.
milk, not plain. He was.
yes, not plain. You need the
yeah,
milk
and
chocolate.
when Georgia and I were tidying up his living room, she was like, "Yes, I found it, a stash of Cadbury's." Yeah. So because he had a sweet tooth. So before we went on all the interviews around the world, I'd go in and tidy up his room a little bit. I'd have to move bottles of fizzy drink. And cake and chocolate.
proper
so
sweet
that,
tooth.
So yeah. So
In
that we
fairness,
didn't-
he'd worked it off, didn't he? You know what I mean?
Exactly, he needed the sugar.
Wow.
He also, as you said, you travelled around the world. He got to meet quite a few world leaders. I mean, he got to meet Boris. What was his take on Boris? What did he?
Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, he took all of the politicians in his stride.
Yeah.
He talked to leaders of global organisations, and he was given an award by the past 4 living US presidents, not the very last one, the 4 before.
Yeah.
And he took it all in his stride, and he charmed them all. He stayed neutral throughout. We had to have a little conversation about that early on. I'm like, yes, you need to not be...
Really?
Yes, because he was quite political.
Yeah.
So I said to him, as we realised that he was communicating with the world, said, you need to leave that a bit behind. I'm coaching a 100-year-old,
Yeah.
saying, just don't post your political views, because I don't think anyone wants to hear it. And
Of course,
he
yeah.
said, OK.
Wow.
Did he post stuff for himself on the?
No, he knew, though. So when I first said, we should set you up a Twitter account, foolishly, I thought that if we put photos on there, people would stop asking for them. Foolish.
It's another job for you, isn't it?
Yeah. So within weeks, he had 500,000 followers. God. And so I said, you've got a Twitter account, and you've got, at the time, 100,000 people following you. And he went, right, where are they? And I'm like, not
we knew all over the
sure.
world.
Yeah. And he said, why are they following me? I said, because you're really interesting and you're giving the world hope. And he said, well, what am I saying? And so we'd show him. But of course, it was our voice for him. So it's truly authentic.
Yeah, it's really lovely. He also got knighted by the Queen. That must have been, wow.
Whatever you can imagine it to be, however you imagine it in your head, is 1,000 times more amazing than that.
But it wasn't also when he was knighted by the Queen, you know, the Queen is obviously in the sort of, she's more mature years, and she's doing it with a sword.
Yes.
That's quite...
Hefty, big sword.
Yeah, exactly. That must have been quite an
Yeah.
intimidating thing.
Well, he had said in one of his interviews, I hope she's not too heavy-handed.
I know, exactly. But there must be, even for the Queen doing it, she must think, oh, I must be careful, I don't know, I could poke someone's eye out.
But
must
she
be
was
quite nervous.
sturdy.
Oh, was she?
And
Yeah.
I'll never repeat the conversation that they had because he didn't want it to be repeated. But I did hear her say, don't worry, I've done it a few times before. And I'm quite gentle.
Oh.
It was amazing, honestly amazing. And she asked to see all 5 of us.
Yeah.
So we all
Wow.
went together and we all spoke to her and she talked to each one of us.
Did you have lunch there and things? Or
It was
did they?
COVID, I think,
Oh,
honestly.
yeah, you couldn't. Oh, that's, yeah.
If I could have wished anything, that they could have gone off and had a cup of tea together, but
Yeah.
couldn't.
That's such a shame.
Such a shame.
Yeah, she's quite an incredible woman,
She's
the Queen, as well, isn't she?
extraordinary.
What was it like sort of seeing her actually up
I
front?
just remember looking at her clothes thinking, wow.
Really?
Yeah, great coat. I did, I really did.
That's an interesting...
He always
Yeah.
looks fabulous.
She does.
You know,
does, but-
Yeah, but up close, it was amazing. I'm like, oh, amazing.
Wow.
Amazing
But
clothes.
she's got lovely soft skin
Lovely
and everything.
skin. And just very, just amazing in the way she communicated with all my family, individually, by name.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a special thing. And he,
Yeah.
and how did he feel about the knighthood? What did he say to you?
Just the best thing ever.
Yeah,
I think that he never believed it would happen. He thought everyone was just being silly. And for him, I think if everything had stopped, or even life had stopped for him the next day, that would have been okay. For him, you know, he was an absolute passionate believer in this country. He felt so proud of living in a multi-generational Britain and to be knighted by the monarch of that amazing place. It was for him everything.
it's just such an incredible man, right?
Would you
must
do a
be so-
film?
Would you do a film?
I think, because there's a film in this, there's a book in this.
There is, isn't there? But would you do a film? Does it need a film? I
It's,
think it feels like everybody knows the
Well,
story.
it's on the cards.
Is it?
Yes.
Exciting.
And
my
he has,
God.
There you go.
well,
Sound
he was,
exclusive.
no. Whilst he was still alive, he wrote his autobiography, and I sat with him as he wrote it.
So he wrote it.
He wrote it,
himself?
yeah. I mean, he had help with it, but
Yeah.
it was all his memory.
Yeah.
So what went into that book is what came out of his mouth.
Wow.
Just amazing to sit there and listen to that. You know, you think as a family, we were so close already. And what happened when we became at the centre of global media attention is we just locked in closer. It was the most, and continues to be the most extraordinary thing.